You have been in situations where someone tried to push your buttons, test your boundaries, or force you to defend yourself, and you felt the immediate urge to snap back, explain your side, or fix the tension. The answer is not that you lack strength, but rather that you have not yet mastered the single most dangerous weapon in human psychology: the power of selective indifference. You are in the exact right place if you are ready to stop being emotionally managed by people who do not deserve your energy. Most of us grew up believing that to hold power in a room, you have to be the loudest voice, the sharpest debater, or the one who always gets the final word. But real, unshakable power belongs to the person who can look directly at a manipulator's provocations and choose to offer absolutely nothing in return. When you learn how to turn your attention into an expensive asset, the games people play around you stop working entirely. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how to use strategic silence, perception control, and calculated absence to make toxic individuals completely powerless against you. Before we unlock these strategies, let us establish your baseline control right now. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I am the owner of my attention. Lesson 1. The rule of strategic absence. You have felt that sudden, subtle shift in a relationship or a workplace where you become too available, too helpful, and suddenly your time is treated like an unpaid utility rather than a privilege. You reply to texts in seconds, you adjust your calendar to fit their chaotic schedule, and the reward you get is being treated like an afterthought. The psychological principle here is simple. Human beings do not value what is constantly accessible, because familiarity naturally erodes respect. When you are always there, your presence stops being a conscious choice and becomes an unexamined expectation. Historical records show that when the powerful Roman general Mark Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus to answer for her political alliances, she deliberately ignored his first 3 urgent commands, making him wait for days while she dictated the exact timing and location of their encounter. In your modern world, this plays out the moment a toxic partner or a demanding manager shoots you a frantic, disrespectful text late on a weekend, expecting you to drop your life and fix their self-created emergency. If you reply instantly, you validate their belief that your boundaries are flexible and your private peace is up for negotiation. By consciously delaying your response until Monday morning, you quietly force them to sit in the discomfort of your absence, letting them realize that access to you must be earned through basic respect. Your stillness teaches them that your life does not revolve around their bad behavior. When you refuse to run when someone whistles, you rewrite the entire power dynamic without saying a single word. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. My time is an exclusive resource. Being universally accessible does not prove your loyalty. It only teaches opportunistic people that your boundaries have no teeth and your personal time carries no cost. When you start pulling back your immediate availability, you will immediately notice who values your presence and who is simply enjoying your lack of limits. Lesson 2. Calculated misdirection. You know exactly what it feels like to walk into an environment where someone has already set a trap for your reputation, spreading quiet rumors or creating a narrative that you are emotional, unqualified, or difficult to work with. You feel the exhausting pressure to walk into that room on the defensive, prepared to argue your worth, unpack their lies, and prove your innocence to people who have already committed to misunderstanding you. The psychological mechanism at play here is controlling the perceptual frame, which means you never enter an argument on your opponent's terms. When you refuse to engage with the specific accusation they threw at you, you break their psychological momentum and force them to react to a completely new reality. According to ancient accounts by Plutarch, Cleopatra completely bypassed the hostile, defensive political frame the Romans had constructed for her by arriving on a magnificent, golden barge dressed as the goddess Isis, completely shifting the conversation from a legal interrogation to a mesmerizing display of supreme cultural authority. Think about a high-stakes corporate meeting where a conniving colleague stands up and aggressively frames your project as a complete failure based on cherry-picked, misleading metrics. Instead of getting defensive, flustered, or diving into a granular argument over their rigged data, you look at them with absolute calm, ignore their numbers entirely, and pivot the focus to the long-term strategic vision of the company. By refusing to play defense within their tiny, hostile box, you leave them standing there looking like an aggressive, short-sighted disruptor while you claim the high ground. You alter the entire room's focus simply by choosing what you deign to acknowledge. He who controls the atmosphere of the room will always dismantle the person who only brought an argument. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose the frame of my reality. When you allow an aggressive person to dictate what you talk about, you are handing them the remote control to your emotional state before the real battle has even begun. True authority is the quiet ability to walk right past a manufactured trap and make the entire room look exactly where you choose to point. Lesson 3. Information asymmetry. You have sat at a lunch table, in a family gathering, or in a corporate boardroom where people talked over you, assuming you were not paying attention or that you did not possess the intellectual depth to understand their complex behind-the-scenes maneuvering. You see them exchange knowing glances, drop coded phrases, or leave you out of the call loop because they see your quiet nature as a sign of passivity. The psychological strategy here is cultivating information asymmetry by masking your total comprehension behind a shield of unbothered silence. When people assume you are oblivious, their guard drops completely, and they begin to speak with a dangerous level of reckless freedom right in front of you. Section 2. Historians note that Cleopatra was the only monarch of her entire Ptolemaic dynasty who took the trouble to master the native languages of the various nations she governed, allowing her to listen directly to the unvarnished talk of foreign ambassadors and local officials, who assumed she required a translator to comprehend them. Consider a social circle or a collaborative project where two toxic peers are quietly plotting to take credit for your creative work, whispering right near your desk because they think you are entirely consumed by your headphones. Instead of jumping up, confronting them mid-sentence, and letting them know exactly what you heard, you keep your head down, remain completely expressionless, and let them talk until they expose their entire timeline and strategy. You do not give away your leverage by reacting early. You collect their secrets like currency until the exact moment their plan relies on your ignorance. Then, with absolute precision, you execute a counter-move that completely neutralizes their plot before they even realize you knew their game. The ultimate advantage belongs to the woman who is secretly 10 steps ahead while everyone else assumes she is completely lost in the dark. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence collects their secrets. When you let people believe they are successfully keeping you in the dark, you are granting them a false sense of security that will eventually become their greatest operational blind spot. Your power grows exponentially every time you choose to observe a pattern instead of interrupting it. Lesson 4. The delayed response. You know that specific, burning sensation when a highly manipulative individual drops a cruel insult disguised as a casual joke, or sends you a toxic, passive-aggressive email explicitly designed to make you lose your cool and overreact. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing turns shallow, and you want to fire back an immediate, devastating response to protect your pride and put them back in their place. The psychological principle here is emotional de-escalation through calculated friction, which means recognizing that every rapid reaction you give to a toxic person is a free piece of data they can use to map your weaknesses. When you starve a provocateur of an immediate reaction, you turn their own toxic energy back onto them, causing them to unravel in the silence you create. Documented diplomatic interactions reveal that when Roman envoys attempted to pressure Cleopatra with immediate, aggressive ultimatums regarding her treasury, she would routinely withdraw into her private quarters for hours, forcing the foreign delegates to stew in agonizing uncertainty while she composed her thoughts. Imagine a toxic family member sending a highly confrontational, manipulative message into a holiday group chat, specifically designed to publicly humiliate you and force you into a messy family feud. Instead of typing out a furious, paragraph-long defense within 3 minutes, you put your phone face down on the table and go for a long, peaceful walk. Your refusal to engage immediately drives them absolutely crazy. Because manipulators feed entirely on the chaos, panic, and defensiveness they manage to evoke in you. When you finally respond hours later with a simple, 3-word, unbothered answer, you show them that their most toxic emotional heat cannot even scratch the surface of your mental discipline. Your peace of mind is far too expensive to be broken by someone who is merely begging for your reaction. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I control the tempo of engagement. Every time you react instantly to a provocation, you are giving away your personal power and letting an unstable person dictate your internal weather. The moment you develop the discipline to pause, you become a brick wall that their psychological games simply bounce off of. Lesson 5. The self-deliberated value anchor. You have experienced those insulting moments where a prospective client, an employer, or even a romantic partner offers you a lowball deal, a minimal amount of respect, or a casual arrangement, assuming you will accept it because you look desperate for validation. They treat your skills, your loyalty, and your affection like a cheap commodity that they can pick up and put down whenever it happens to suit their convenience. The psychological mechanism here is the value anchor, which dictates that human beings do not judge your worth by what you actually deserve, but by the baseline standard you choose to tolerate. If you accept a terrible arrangement with a polite smile, you are actively teaching them that your boundaries can be bought for pennies. Historians verify that even when her kingdom's actual military strength was deeply compromised, Cleopatra maintained an incredibly lavish, majestic court style and refused to negotiate any international treaties from a position of weakness, forcing the Roman Empire to treat her as an equal sovereign. Look at a modern situation where a potential freelance client demands that you slash your standard professional rates by half, giving you a long manipulative speech about how much exposure and future work they might bring to your table. Instead of entering an anxious negotiation, explaining your bills, or begging them to see your worth, you state your final price once with absolute clarity, and then stop talking entirely. If they walk away, you let them go without a single trace of panic, because you understand that your value is not subject to their personal budget or their approval. This quiet refusal to bend your standard forces them to realize that you are not a desperate option, but an expensive luxury they simply cannot afford to lose. You do not need to explain your worth to individuals who are explicitly searching for a discount on your boundaries. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. My value is non-negotiable. The midpoint. The core architecture of indifference. Let us pause right here, because we need to look at the deeper psychological engine that keeps all of these rules running smoothly. This is the single most critical insight of this entire video. The reason you have been hurt, outmaneuvered, or manipulated in the past is not because you are not intelligent. And it is certainly not because you are not capable. It is because you possess a deeply empathetic, generous heart that automatically assumes everyone else operates with the same baseline level of honesty and fairness that you do. You keep expecting toxic, self-serving individuals to suddenly wake up, see your pain, appreciate your sacrifices, and grant you the validation you have spent years working to earn. But here is the cold truth that historical power players understood perfectly. You cannot use logic to fix an emotional vampire. And you cannot use kindness to win a game against someone who is playing by a completely different set of rules. Real empowerment does not mean becoming a cruel, unfeeling villain who seeks to hurt others. It means becoming completely awake to human nature as it actually is, rather than how you wish it to be. It means realizing that your attention, your emotional energy, and your quiet peace are finite, highly expensive assets that must be guarded behind an unbreachable wall of selective indifference. The moment you stop chasing validation from people who are explicitly designing you, is the exact moment you reclaim complete ownership of your life. Lesson 6. Selective vulnerability. You have shared a deep personal secret, a past mistake, or a current insecurity with a supposedly close friend or a romantic partner, only to watch them weaponize that exact piece of information against you during a future disagreement. They bring it up with a sharp smile, wrapping it inside a sarcastic comment to make you feel small, exposed and instantly compliant to whatever they want from you. The psychological strategy here is selective vulnerability, which means you carefully control the personal data you broadcast to the world. If you choose to share a weakness, it must be an issue you have already entirely processed and healed from, ensuring it can never be used as leverage to break your emotional frame. Documented court accounts show that Cleopatra would frequently share highly calculated, minor personal fears about her political safety with Roman visitors, intentionally leading them to believe they understood her psychological blind spots, while her real strategic objectives remained completely hidden. Think about a toxic office environment where a competitive coworker subtly fishes for your deepest insecurities, asking you if you feel intimidated by the new leadership team, or if you are worried about the upcoming company restructuring. Instead of opening up, sharing your genuine anxieties and giving them ammunition to pass along to your manager, you hand them a completely manufactured, harmless piece of data. You tell them with a relaxed smile that your biggest current struggle is deciding which new, professional certification course to enroll in next month. By giving them a fake target to focus on, you completely protect your real inner world, leaving them totally powerless to find a real vulnerability they can exploit to destabilize your position. A weapon cannot hurt you if it hits a target that you intentionally built out of smoke. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. My inner world is fortified. When you wear your deepest fears on your sleeve out of a desire for quick connection, you are handing a map of your psychological triggers straight to people who may not have your best interests at heart. Learn to keep your real roots deep underground, while giving the public only the leaves you are perfectly willing to lose. Lesson 7. Reframing via cultural symbolism. You have been in a position where an aggressive individual tried to reduce your entire identity down to a single mistake, a past failure, or a lower corporate title, trying to keep you locked inside a tiny box where you feel permanently inferior. They speak to you with a patronizing tone, treat your ideas like cute suggestions, and constantly remind everyone in the room of where you sit on the official organizational ladder. The psychological mechanism here is narrative reframing, which means you completely reject the small social identity your environment tries to hand you, and instead anchor your behavior to a much larger, undeniable standard of personal excellence. You do not argue with their low opinion. You simply carry yourself with a level of dignity that makes their smallness look completely ridiculous. Inscriptions and coin mints from her reign prove that Cleopatra consistently bypassed the traditional, narrow definition of an Egyptian queen by officially aligning her image with the cosmic authority of Isis, making her leadership appear as an absolute, unquestionable fact of nature. Consider a modern family dynamic or a corporate team where people constantly treat you like the quiet, submissive assistant who is just happy to be included in the conversation. Instead of getting angry, throwing a tantrum, or demanding that they show you some respect, you begin to alter the way you move, speak, and respond with complete intention. You stop over-explaining your choices. You You look people directly in the eye without blinking, and you deliver your work with a flawless, undeniable level of elite professionalism. By aligning your daily actions with a high personal standard of self-respect, you quietly force the entire environment to adjust to your new value anchor, without you ever having to ask for their permission. You do not need an official title from a room full of insecure people to carry yourself like the absolute master of your own destiny. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I define the standard of my presence. When you allow other people's narrow descriptions to define how you feel about your own capabilities, you are living inside a prison that they built for you out of their own limitations. True sovereignty is the quiet decision to break out of their tiny boxes and set a standard that nobody can ignore. Lesson 8. The paradox of strategic generosity. You have worked under a highly toxic leader or spent time inside a social group where the dominant person used fear, exclusion, and subtle intimidation to keep everyone else isolated, compliant, and constantly competing for their specific favor. You see your peers stepping on each other, hiding information, and staying quiet during moments of blatant injustice just to keep themselves on the good side of the person who holds the keys to the room. The psychological strategy here is cultivating horizontal loyalty, which means you completely ignore the toxic bully at the top and instead use unexpected kindness, support, and resources to build deep, unbreakable alliances with the people sitting right next to you. Roman military records confirm that during their joint campaigns, Cleopatra bypassed Mark Antony's erratic authority by directly paying the back wages of his struggling soldiers and distributing massive food supplies to his officers, securing their absolute personal loyalty to her rather than to their own commander. Imagine a toxic workplace where an insecure department head keeps everyone terrified of making a single mistake, creating a culture of blame where people are constantly thrown under the bus. Instead of trying to suck up to that manager or playing their toxic political games to survive, you begin quietly supporting your fellow team members behind the scenes. You help a struggling colleague finish a difficult report. You publicly credit an intern for a brilliant idea they had, and you offer a safe space for people to vent without gossip. Over time, you build a powerful, invisible network of genuine respect and mutual loyalty that completely insulates you, leaving the toxic manager totally unable to isolate or target you, because the entire team quietly has your back. Real influence is not built by bowing to the tyrant at the top. It is cultivated by lifting up the people who stand right beside you in the trenches. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I build alliances through genuine value. A bully's power relies entirely on keeping everyone else in the room feeling isolated, terrified, and fundamentally disconnected from one another. The moment you step into the space and start creating real, supportive community among your peers, you are quietly dismantling the bully's leverage from the ground up. Lesson 9. Preemptive compliance. You have dealt with a deeply controlling partner, a narcissistic family member, or a micromanaging boss who demands total control over your actions, tracking your every move and waiting for you to rebel so they can punish you and play the victim. They push you into a corner, explicitly hoping you will blow up, scream, or break a rule so they can point their finger at you and tell the world that you are the unstable, irrational problem in the relationship. The psychological mechanism here is strategic compliance, which means you deceptively agree to their minor rules or superficial demands on the surface to completely disarm their suspicion, while you quietly prepare your ultimate exit strategy behind the scenes. Historical accounts by Roman biographers detail how Cleopatra initially pretended to fully accept her capture by Octavian's guards, cooperating with their inventory of her palace treasures to lower their guard completely, while she quietly orchestrated her final, legendary act of self-over, Look at a highly manipulative personal relationship where a toxic partner demands to know exactly who you are talking to, trying to cut you off from your support network by throwing a massive tantrum every time you go out. Instead of screaming back, fighting over your phone, and giving them the explosive argument they are looking for to justify their control, you smile, nod, and calmly agree to keep them updated on your evening plans. You do not waste an ounce of your emotional energy trying to argue with their irrational insecurity. You simply use their newfound peace of mind to quietly, methodically arrange your financial independence, secure a new apartment, and build your real exit plan. By the time they realize you are no longer under their thumb, you have already walked out the door for good. You do not waste your limited energy fighting a tyrant in the mud when you can quietly build a bridge that carries you completely out of their kingdom. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. My compliance is a strategic shield. An aggressive controller is always looking for external signs of your internal rebellion so they can move quickly to tighten their grip on your life. When you master the discipline to look perfectly cooperative on the outside, you gain the quiet freedom to build an unshakable life that they can never touch. Lesson 10. The isolation barrier. Section 1. You have experienced those draining social circles, friend groups, or workspaces where toxic individuals feel entitled to unrestricted access to your personal space, wandering into your office, calling your phone at midnight, or dropping by your home unannounced to dump their emotional garbage into your life. They treat your schedule like an open book, interrupting your focus, disrupting your peace of mind, and pulling you into endless petty drama that has absolutely nothing to do with your personal goals. The psychological strategy here is the multi-layered isolation barrier, which means you establish clear, highly structured operational filters that people must pass through before they can ever reach your inner world. Historians record that Cleopatra's innermost council chamber was guarded by multiple tiers of highly vetted palace officials, ensuring that foreign envoys and minor nobles could never simply walk into her presence without a long, heavily scrutinized clearance process. Think about your daily life where a highly dramatic, chaotic friend constantly calls you multiple times a day to cry about the exact same self-created relationship problems they refuse to fix. Instead of picking up every single call, listening for an hour, and ending your day feeling completely exhausted and uninspired, you implement a strict digital boundary. You change your phone settings so their notifications are muted. You let their frantic calls go straight to voicemail, and you reply hours later with a polite, brief text message asking them to email you if it is an actual emergency. This clear operational barrier quickly trains them to realize that your emotional energy is not a free, 24-hour dumping ground for their unresolved personal chaos. Your mental health is an expensive sanctuary, and you have every right to decide exactly who is allowed to cross the threshold. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I am the gatekeeper of my energy. When you leave the doors to your life wide open out of a fear of looking impolite, you are essentially inviting every passing emotional storm to wreck your internal home. Learn to build a beautiful, strong perimeter around your peace, and watch how quickly the wrong people step away on their own. You no longer have to walk through your life as a passive observer who constantly gets caught off guard by the unpredictable games, subtle manipulations, and shifting agendas of the people around you. You now possess the exact same psychological architecture that allowed history's most brilliant figures to look directly at chaos, power struggles, and intense personal pressure without ever losing control of their own minds. You understand that your time is an exclusive privilege. Your emotional reactions are a currency that must never be spent cheaply, and your quiet silence is often the most dangerous weapon you can bring into a hostile room. This deep, clear-eyed awareness does not make you a cold, uncaring person. It makes you a truly free, unshakable woman who chooses exactly who deserves access to her soul. So take these 10 lessons, Step back out into your workplace, your relationships, and your social circle, and start watching the patterns instead of listening to the noise. Let the behavior speak for itself. Protect your personal peace at all costs, and never feel the need to explain your standards to anyone who is explicitly looking to break them. Which area of your life right now is begging for you to stop responding, stop explaining, and start using the profound power of absolute indifference? Now drop this final affirmation in the comments. I am completely untouchable.